Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Hello again and welcome to episode 89 of this podcast series, and this time we're here in Oxford to hear from a UK Pantomime Association discussion panel.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
In the last episode we met David Lloyd-Jones, the pantomime director who's had successful and varied careers in both the theatre and education. If you missed it, you can still check it out along with all of our other previous episodes. And if you're new to the podcast series, we've already had a variety of guests, from celebrities and backstage team members to practitioners and academics. We've discussed specific panto titles, talked about how pantomime is produced, its history and its future. So remember, you can check them out where you normally get your podcasts from, and don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss any future episodes. So this time, here we are at the North Wall Arts Centre in Oxford to join pantomime producers, directors, performers, theatre venue staff and educators for the very first pantomime panel event. The subject for this one is relaxed and accessible pantomime performance, and we'll talk about what they entail and why they're so important. We'll be hearing from panellists Chris Jarvis, Annie Bannister, Dr. Chris Abbott and Jess Thom, who will be discussing and debating making relaxed and accessible performance as inclusive as possible. But first, let's step inside before the event begins and speak to Vice Chairman of the UK Pantomime Association and man behind this event, Sam Munday-Webb. I think it was your idea, Sam, wasn't it? How did it all come about?
So I've always been really passionate about access to the arts. I saw an inspiring talk actually by Jess Thom here 2 years ago, and I thought she'd be a great kind of advocate and advisor for pantomime. And I think obviously in the first half of the event today, I talked about kind of going to panto and just finding it too loud, and that's not necessarily an issue that I have. And actually we need to be more aware of how we make performance that works for all on every level.
Most venues certainly will say theatre is for everybody, but actually that's not always been the case, has it? And panto has been leading the way in many ways.
Yeah, panto has led the way, and we're very lucky. But I think this is our opportunity to continue leading the way and continue pushing forward. And you know, ultimately, the fact that people are saying that panto leads the way, we find ourselves in a really privileged position where we can start to make really exciting inroads and start to go beyond what is just a relaxed or inclusive performance, and start to think about how everyone's included. I mentioned in the performance that as a I lost my way. That's my ADHD kicking in there, right there. But as a performer, I was just told it was a relaxed performance. Well, that's great. But actually, it would be great for me to have some training, what to expect. How I can better make it work for those audience members.
And the first thing that Sam did to get the discussion underway was to invite the panel to introduce themselves to the audience.
I'm Jess Thom. I'm the co-artistic director of Tourette's Hero, which is a disabled-led organisation that works across the cultural sector. I also have Tourette's, which gives me a very wiggly body. My most frequent motor tics is banging my chest, which is happening now, and biscuit. And my most frequent vocal tics, so involuntary noises, are biscuit, hedgehog, cat, so you're going to hear that a lot. Biscuit, if I tick something funny, you are absolutely allowed to laugh.
My name is Chris Jarvis. I'm a writer, director and performer on CBeebies television and also in theatres with pantos.
Hi, my name is Annie Bannister. I'm an independent access consultant.
Chris Abbott.
I'm a retired academic with a background as a teacher in special education and then a researcher in access to literacy.
Okay, thank you very much. Jess, could we start by talking about yourself as a user of relaxed performances, kind of what you would expect from a relaxed performance?
Yeah, and I can talk from my perspective as someone who has access, who uses access for relaxed performance and has that as an access requirement, but also as someone who makes relaxed spaces and makes work in relaxed ways. So at Tourette's Hero, we would understand a relaxed performance to be a show or an event that has thought about and has made provision for core access elements that come together to make something relaxed. And so we say there are 7 core elements of a relaxed approach. The first is a shared understanding. So a shared understanding amongst everybody involved about what a relaxed performance is, why you're doing it, and who might benefit from it, and making that invitation and that understanding as wide as possible, and having a clear, positively framed way of explaining that to other people. The second core element is pre-event or pre-show information. So information in accessible formats, ideally that uses words and images or symbols to explain what to expect. And that would include things like the sensory landscape and the participatory landscape, so people know the sort of full range of what to expect. Staff training, so staff who've had an opportunity to do disability equality training, who have had an opportunity to learn about disabled-led ways of thinking, like the social model of disability, which is a way of thinking about disability that understands that it's normal for our bodies and minds to work in different ways, and for some people to have specific impairments and conditions and others not. And the social model understands that what makes people disabled people is the barriers that they experience in the world because of a collective failure to think about that diversity of bodies and minds when we set spaces up. And so having staff training that explores things like the social model is really important, because that really helps us think about how we can identify and remove barriers to creative places. The fourth core element is a pre-show announcement. So an announcement at the start to the whole audience that gives the freedom to respond naturally, acknowledges it as a relaxed space, gives permission to move in and out of the space as people need to. Hedgehog, cats, and particularly sets up a relaxed approach to noise and movement in the audience, and understands that attention and focus looks different for different bodies and minds. The fifth element, is a multi-sensory approach, so that means thinking about the sensory landscape of the show, thinking about sensory sensitivity, so understanding that we all process information from our senses differently, and we experience that differently. So we need to think about what's happening in a show, the lights and the sound, and think about how that might feel for people who have sensory sensitivities and if that needs to be adjusted. Number 6 is a chill out space, so a space outside of the main performance space that people can go to if they need to. And we deliberately don't call that a quiet space because the ways people might need to use that will be very different, and they're not all quiet. That's a space where you can go to do what you need to do to be able to manage your own requirements. And then the final one, and the number 7, and the thing that is really important and sometimes gets missed, is a clear plan for what to do if someone makes a complaint or if something goes wrong. And particularly thinking about how people might respond in ways that don't put all of the pressure or make individuals feel like they're the problem.
Dr. Chris Abbott, you come to this from a different sort of angle to the other panellists, from education primarily. Yeah. Tell us your story and how you got involved.
Well, I've always worked with kids who have problems accessing literacy, so in the broad area of sort of cognitive difficulties. And I've also always been involved in performance, so obviously the two came together. I wanted to take those kids to performances, and pantomime came up quite early on. Similarly, at the same time, I started working with the idea of using graphic symbols to support communication. So the two came together when we were able to create graphic symbols to support performances of pantomimes. So these are resources, visual resources, that you use before you come to the performance and after you've seen it, so that you can understand the whole process of going to a pantomime and how a pantomime works, but also the particular story that you're seeing on that evening.
Yeah, and I think one of the key things, one of the key messages that's come from the session so far is preparation is everything. You know, that sort of preparing for the unexpected is one aspect of it, but actually giving that foundation that people, children particularly, can come and see. knowing full well what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's true for all visits to pantomime, not just school ones, but family ones too. So I was really pleased that over the years we managed to get to the stage where these resources were freely available to anyone, so that a family can download it and, talk about it beforehand, talk about it afterwards. Because, there are things that perhaps as adults we take for granted in a story, but kids don't understand.
Yeah.
So although they'll go and they'll enjoy it and they'll love the jokes, they'll love the knockabout humour, maybe they wouldn't enjoy it at the level that they could if they were just given a bit of help to access it.
I think as well, another aspect of this is that some of the stuff that you've been talking about particularly is far-reaching. It's not just about a relaxed performance. These resources are useful for any performance.
Yeah, and I mean, in fact, in recent years, there's been a great deal of use of graphic symbols with children who are acquiring English. So newly arrived refugee kids, for example, may use symbols for a year or two as they are acquiring English. So yes, you actually open up the performance to a whole range of different groups that may need some help. Panto is inherently a visual form. We're very good. We involve the audience. It's not sort of sterile, far away behind the footlights. So it actually engages an audience from the beginning. So we're 2/3 of the way there, and anything we can do to make that good experience even better seems to me to be worthwhile doing.
Jess, it's been an absolutely fabulous, informative and inspiring day with the panellists all bringing different perspectives and experiences. Some great questions from the audience as well. But the fact that we're having this conversation at all is a good thing in itself.
100%. We need to be talking about access. Disabled people make up almost 25% of the population, but we're definitely not always thought about in creative and theatre spaces. So having those conversations and feeling excited about it creatively. And often what happens around access is people, it feels really specialised, or it feels like someone else's responsibility, or people are worried about getting it wrong, so they put off starting anything, trying. And what I would say is it's a shared responsibility that we all have to think about diversity of bodies and minds. So this is a great starting point for a conversation, but it's also great to starting point for action and for doing sort of small things that will start to hopefully build into a more inclusive world rather than sort of maintaining a more exclusionary one. So I grew up going to see pantos, and they were very inclusive spaces. As soon as I started trying to see shows that in more traditional settings, in other that were outside of the sort of genre of panto, I definitely very quickly learnt that wasn't a space for me. It wasn't a space that had thought about me. It wasn't a space that I was safe. And I selected away from theatre, including panto, for a long time on that basis. So I think it's really important that we think about and nurture environments that tell everybody that this is a space for them, that they're welcome and that they're thought about and that they're valued, and that they can create, that their stories matter and that they can be involved in creating as well as watching shows. It's also, I think, important for panto to have that dialogue with the wider sector so that it doesn't become sort of silos of practice, so that we can learn from each other, and so that if people develop a love of panto and find going into those spaces accessible and inclusive, so that they are then able to see other types of work at other points in the year. So Panto has done some really amazing work, particularly around relaxed performance and access more generally, but I'd really love to see that continue to evolve and develop. Biscuit, hedgehog.
Through your own experience, you've become really inspirational, if you don't mind me saying so, and you come at this from various different angles. You have Tourette's and the tics that we can hear now. And interesting, when you talk to kids, it's interesting that many of them ask you if you really are obsessed with biscuits, for instance.
Biscuit, hedgehog.
But you're also a wheelchair user, so you're coming at this from all sorts of angles.
Yeah, and it's really important that we think about disabled people not just in terms of individual impairments, because most people will have a mix of different requirements. Most people will have some connection to disability at some point in their life through themselves or their family. It's biscuit. Often disabled people aren't really thought about in the context of families and communities. If I go and see a show at some venues, there's a wheelchair and companion space, but if I want to sit next to my 7-year-old niece and my personal assistant and support worker, I need both of that. I need both of those things. So it's really great if we think about and don't make assumptions about the lives of disabled people. And the way to do that is for that to be an open conversation, and for that to include lots of different types of body, mind, perspective and circumstances, because theatre and panto is about community. It's about celebrating our creative lives and bringing people together, and that feels most exciting when it's inclusive of everybody.
If there are two key messages to take away today for producers and venue managers, I think one would be preparation,
100%, yep.
Actually preparing your audience for what is going to happen,
yep.
and two is flexibility in
Yep.
all sorts of ways, not least the space.
Yeah, I think that those two, you've picked out those two things, and I think when we talk about planning and preparation, we're thinking about that right from when you're building the idea, like what shows you're going to do, where you're going to do them, making sure that you're thinking about that within the budget, all the way through to how artists are prepared, how performers are prepared, how ideas are communicated. I've had lots of experiences where you might have a great creative experience in a venue, but then you go out and try and buy something from the cafe and you have a negative experience. So it's also important to think about it in its entirety. Those two ideas feel really key.
Yeah, and in terms of the chill out, the breakout room, whatever you want to describe it as, it needs to be whatever anybody wants it to be. Everybody's different, but one thing for me, I think, which is really important, is that to enable them to stay engaged with the actual product, the show, there should be a stream of some description there so they can actually dip in and out. So when they do go back into the auditorium, they are up to date with what's been happening.
I think that it's good to have a stream of it somewhere else outside of the main auditorium. I will personally keep that out of the chill out space particularly, because if someone has left a space because they need to regulate themselves, it's important that they have a sort of the most neutral environment to do that and can have control over that. But I think having a stream somewhere else, and also so it's like if you need to go and move around, that you can stand and move and watch something, and then maybe go in and out. And I think that also that idea of creating modular spaces that can adapt and that can flex and that can respond to the people in the room. So often I will say at the start of a performance, Biscuit, we can make this space work for us as a group of people. And there's something really powerful about saying that. So often people end up putting themselves through discomfort or, not popping to the toilet when they need to, and for fear of disrupting or because of normative assumptions. But being able to say, look, we can make this work for us as a community.
In terms of representation on the stage as well, I just wonder whether you've ever considered doing panto.
I haven't, but I would love to. I think I'd really enjoy it. Biscuit, Tourette's feels very panto ready. It would definitely be one of the amazing things about having Biscuit for me about having Tourette's is that it gives me access to Biscuit spontaneous creativity that I wouldn't otherwise have. When we first started making theatre, it felt like this sort of massive challenge about how we made space how we said the things that mattered to us, but also allowed space for that spontaneity. And I think panto would really naturally embrace that as an anarchic reality.
Well, it'd have to be Aladdin, wouldn't it? Because Aladdin is something you talk about a lot.
I talk about Aladdin a lot, and I have claimed to be doing Aladdin more times than is, no, I can count. But
so who do you see yourself playing?
I have no idea.
Oh, come on.
Hedgehog Biscuit. I'd love to be the genie.
Jess, absolutely inspirational. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much.
Now, Chris Jarvis, you've worked in children's entertainment pretty much your entire working life as a CBeebies presenter, pantomime director, performer, writer, and so on. But how much of an eye-opener was today for you?
Oh, a big eye-opener. I'm so pleased I came because I think there has been an element of guesswork. We always take relaxed performances seriously, and the venues that I've worked for and in over the last however many years have all done their very, very best and have incredible talent, who have taken a lot of trouble and engaged with local schools, but there isn't really a set procedure or a set of protocols. So if it does appear on the website, it'll be absolutely fantastic, very useful for everyone.
The two things that everybody can take away today, for me, are preparing the audience in any number of ways for what's going to happen during the performance, and then the flexibility of the performance itself and the environment in which the audience are in.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think the basics we're all doing, but you're right, it's the preparation, the engagement with local schools and families to find out what they want, because everybody, the spectrum is 3D, and it's worth tailoring those shows. So in Poole, that has happened over the years. So I'm really hoping what we do there is absolutely on the nose for those people, and we actually get teachers, especially for large groups, to come and see earlier performances and get their feedback.
I think as well that some of the ideas that came up today, some things that are already being used, are more far-reaching than a relaxed performance. They can be used in conjunction with pretty much any performance.
Dr. Chris Abbott was talking about widget. They're brilliant, these symbols. We used them in Richmond for a couple of years, and in Swindon actually, and they created these wonderful packs. There's one that they send out which is preparing children or whoever needs it for going to the theatre, the actual experience, what you'll find there, and the other one is more tailored to that production. So they'll go to the trouble of finding out the colours and patterns of the costumes, and everyone becomes like a little Lego character, and they tell the story. You know, there's no such thing as a spoiler alert, you know, when you're explaining because they want to know the story. And it's very interesting with CBeebies actually. So the pantomimes we make every year that sit on the iPlayer forevermore, they're watched over and over. The hits that we get are tremendous, because all children love repetition. I'm just talking about children at the moment. They've taken on a life of their own, really.
So I've got to ask you while you're here, what's the CBeebies panto this year?
We have just filmed it, and it's Beauty and the Beast. Ooh. And we filmed it at the Festival Theatre, how lucky were we, in Edinburgh. Some standout performances. Everyone I thought was brilliant. I can say that because I wasn't in it. I was directing it. Some big-headed CBeebies presenter. No, some real standout performances, not least because the parts were so fabulous. Maddie Moat is sensational as the villain this year. Very different. She becomes this sort of baby Jane Hudson type character. I think she could get her own show, this character. But yeah, it was great. And the first show we do, before we switch the cameras on, is a relaxed performance, and that was wonderful. And but we have a breakout room for every show. We keep the lights on, not least so we can film the audience. So, you know, in some ways it feels like every show is a relaxed performance.
But you know, the great thing about the CBeebies Panto is it introduces many of your presenters to Panto for the first time. They go on to appear in Panto themselves. I've worked with Kat Sandian and Maddie as well, and they love Panto.
Oh, they do. And it's so important for our work, because on television you don't always see the audience, and I wish I'd done more touring as well as panto. Going back, that's my only regret. Well, no, can't say only regret. There are hundreds, but you know that one in particular, because you've got to know your audience. You know, especially if you're spending day after day in a small studio with 3 camera people who, you know, are not children and don't respond in the same way.
In the second session, Access and Inclusion Consultant for the Arts and Sport, Annie Bannister, explained how she got involved in this work in the first place.
I have a 25-year-old son who has a range of very complex needs, including learning difficulties and autism, huge sensory issues. So everything I do is based really entirely on him. He is how I got into this in the first place. Because Thomas, being my son, and I have always loved theatre, Tom was born in a trunk. There's no other way of putting it. You know, he was absolutely taken to theatre from a very, very young age. But I had to myself not adapt the performances, obviously, but make it okay for him to be able to go. So I'd often talk to the theatres ahead of time and get stuff put into place for when we went. That led on to a number of years later doing relaxed performances for him and with him. And he's very much part of the team. I'll go to see a show first, the pantomime first, to get my ideas of how it ought to be adapted and also what needs to be done in the venue. But Tom will come along as well later to see a non-relaxed version. His reactions, either his physical reaction to noises or sort of suddennesses or smells. He's very sensitive to smell, and that can be a real issue with sort of smoke effects and things. But he'll also tell me what he thinks ought to be changed. And that's really useful because I'm not neurodivergent. So having Tom with me, he will see things that I simply don't see. And I've been doing it for so many years now that I'm fairly good at second guessing what needs to be changed. But if I take Tom with me, you will actually see the physical reaction he has to either good stuff or bad stuff. And sometimes it can be to really good stuff. It can be things like the final song of a panto being signed in Makaton, and somebody actually reaching out to meet him on his level doing that is just wonderful. But also, if there is a loud bang or something, oh my goodness, you'll know about it with Tom, because he will scream. He nearly brought a West End performance to a standstill of Oliver some years ago, where Fagin threw a teddy bear into a fire, and Tom stood up and started screaming and screaming. And it's like, okay, that's what we don't do. He's extremely useful in that way, and he's very much part of everything I do with Black's performances as well as with everything else.
Annie, it's been a fabulous day, and I think so many good things will come out of today, and so much good work is already being done. And in many ways, pantomime has been leading the way.
I think very much so. Relaxed performances started in the West End with The Lion King, but Panto picked up on it very, very quickly, particularly originally at Birmingham Hippodrome, and then actually De Montfort Hall in Leicester were the second venue to actually have a relaxed panto. And we do very much lead the way, and it's very innovative and very, very important.
One of the key themes, I think, throughout has been preparation. Preparing any audience member with whatever background they have for what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And that can be done in so many different ways, can't it?
Yeah, it can be done by people visiting a theatre and actually just seeing what's there, or a social story. When I'm doing a relaxed performance, I send out quite a lengthy description of everything from the first visit to the theatre, the first step into the theatre, to what the performance is going to be, just so everyone knows what to expect and where to go. And it's the questions that people don't always think to ask. If you're not a theatre person, theatre can be quite intimidating, and that's what we need to get away from, that theatre is for everyone, but actually explaining what's going to happen, explaining what is happening is key to that, demystifying it, I think.
I think the other thing that struck home for me, and I was aware of it, but perhaps even more so today, is the flexibility of the environment, and that means having a chill out or breakout room and things like that.
Yeah, a chill out room is incredibly important, ideally with a live stream of the show, so that you can go and sit there and not miss anything. I've known families who actually never make it into the auditorium. For whatever reason, it's just not happening for them, but they're still part of it by sitting in the chill out room in comfort and watching the show in their own way, accessing it their own way.
Again, on the preparation theme, it's really important within the performance itself that there are no sudden surprises.
I think so, particularly noise surprises. My particular hate is gunshots. That's quite scary for anyone, but for somebody who's autistic, that's actually terrifying. The thing about panto is we are supposed to be scared. We have a baddie, we have Captain Hook, we have the Wicked Queen. You don't want to lose that, but you need to make it manageable by preparing people. If you're going to have a scary monster on stage, having a photograph of it doesn't take away from anything. It adds to things. People know what to expect.
But one thing panto is really good at is signposting what's about to happen. Even if it's a play on for the baddie, it's those sudden bangs. Also, those sensory overload things like smoke, for instance, and major lighting changes.
Major lighting changes are a big thing, particularly if you're involving people there with who might have photosensitive epilepsy. You've got to be so careful with the lighting. And again, that needs to be in all the literature about it, that you're going to expect there'll be strobe lighting at this point or fluorescent at that point, blackout. It's really, really important,
And the other thing that we talk about quite regularly on this podcast is that, theatre and panto in particular is a really fabulous opportunity for children and young people to go to the theatre for the first time, and they can be enriched and fulfilled in so many ways because of that. It would be tragic if some children weren't able to do that because they didn't want to come to a theatre for whatever reason. They had special needs, for instance. And so Tom is a great example for me of how enriched he's been, how fulfilled he is by that theatrical experience. So much so, he's become a bit of an expert in panto and has played a dame.
Yes, Tom adores panto. You would think that he gets to see 8 or 9 pantos every Christmas. You'd think he'd get bored. He never does. He absolutely, he's got my love of it. He's inherited. And yes, as you say, Martin, he's a fabulous dame.
He certainly is. And for those people who don't know, tell us about his background.
Tom is very unusual in that I found out actually while still pregnant that he was going to have a range of very, very complex issues. He's actually got a rare chromosome disorder, and he's gone through the special school system and the specialist nursery called Memphis in our area before that. He has physical needs, he has learning difficulties, he's neurodiverse, he has autism, and he's very, very sensitive to noise, smells, all this sort of thing. So he can access non-relaxed performances and does. I mean, Tom lives at the theatre, but that's taken a lot of preparation, a lot of years of just practicing. But panto works perfectly for him because he knows it'll be a happily ever after at the end. There won't be a sad ending. He knows there will be a wedding probably at the end.
We are moving on.
We are. I mean, there's an acknowledgement now that theatre, acting, performing is for anyone. You don't need to be able-bodied. You can be learning disabled. Again, going back to De Montfort Hall, they have a wonderful scheme where a local drama company, which is also a social care provider for severely disabled, severely learning disabled young people, they take over the stage at De Montfort Hall and they do their own panto. I can't describe what a wonderful thing that is. I wish more theatres would do that. Just allowing a real live stage to people who wouldn't normally ever get to be on the stage. It's just wonderful.
There were a number of Imagine representatives here today. In a moment's time, we'll hear from Associate Producer and Head of Celebrity Casting, Laura Taylor. First of all, Associate Producer and Artistic Director Eric Potts is with me. And Eric, you, of course, have been involved in pantomime as a writer, as an actor and as a director, but how much of the whole process for you is thinking about accessibility and relaxed performances?
Yeah, it's become, rightly so, more and more important. And with my director's hat on, I think that's where it really kind of sits. And then it's important for the director, the creative team as a whole, to share that information and those expectations with the cast, with everyone else involved in creating the relaxed performances. But I think it's important that as a director you preempt, as we've been hearing today, you make sure that everyone from the entire venue as well as the production side are aware of what's happening, when it should happen and why it should happen, so that we do, if possible, inform the audience about what to expect, because of course there will be people who have just booked for that performance irrespective of whether or not it's a relaxed performance, as well as those who will benefit from it being such. So it's important that everyone knows what's going on, the differences. So that involves the box office from the word go. They've got to know, they've got to let people know this is happening when. But certainly from the creative point of view, it's about making sure that you have the right technical information and the right ability to put the technical changes into place, the lowering of sound levels, the removal of certain lighting cues that are going to cause problems. So it's about, a key word I think for almost everything, Martin, it's about communication with the cast, with the whole tech team, with the entire creative team, and with our colleagues in the venue as well, so that everything can be preempted and actually go smoothly. And it always feels strange as an actor doing a relaxed performance, because you can't help thinking, they're not going to see that bit, that's a shame, and that works better with smoke. And then at the end of the show you get feedback obviously from the audience members, and invariably, universally, it's been, that was just absolutely phenomenal and we couldn't have come if it hadn't been for that show. So it's a real plus and a real boost, and you forget the fact that they're missing out on some wonderful effects, if you like.
Well, there are only minor things as well, and Ali Bannister was saying, that panto is great at giving at a relaxed performance as close to the general performance as possible, because that's what the audience want. It's just those unexpected things. And I mean, panto is a multi-sensory feast, isn't it? You've just got to balance the senses a little bit more.
Exactly, and I think Annie really hit the nail on the head when she kept coming back to the word suddenly. It reminded me of David Wood's phrase with all the suddenlies in the play, and it's about removing those suddenlies that allow those audience members who specifically choose the relaxed performance to actually sail through that and get on the joy of the narrative arc, the adventure of panto, and enjoy as much visual spectacle and as much audio spectacle as is appropriate for them, and making it a real enjoyable experience that everyone else can have in panto as well. And
when you're writing the script as well, I mean, signposting is rife in panto, isn't it? People generally know what's going to happen, but that signposting is even more important in a relaxed performance because it's preempting those sudden, unexpected things.
It is, and entries of the baddie and things like that. People, they need to be prepared. So again, that right from the word go, it's about the clarity, and it's about facilitating that accessibility and just making it an enjoyable experience with as few shocks, I think is the word. But at the same time, and again it's been picked up by the panel this morning, not losing the jeopardy. Yeah. We've got to maintain the jeopardy. It's half of the panto story, as it should be, but at the same time making that manageable for everyone in the audience.
Laura, as an associate producer, this is always in your mindset anyway, isn't it? Those relaxed performances and those special needs audience members.
Absolutely. We've just been speaking as a team and agreed how brilliant today was for so many reasons. It was really informative, and we've come away with so many discussion points and ways that we know we can improve and do better and keep conversations going about this. I think that's the most important thing. There's some big things that aren't going to happen overnight and probably going to take years to process, but there's a lot of quick wins that we can do. But 70% of what was discussed today was new information and conversation sparking, and right, we need to do this, we need to think about that. But 30% was confirmation that we're actually doing okay, and we're already doing quite a lot to move forward to make pantomime as accessible for everyone as it should be. So I have loved today. It has been so useful and really, really worthwhile attending.
Obviously it's a key partnership between the producers and the venue as well, isn't it? And interestingly, Bannister, who was here, one of the panellists today, set up the very first relaxed performance at the De Montfort Hall in Leicester. Was actually the first panto in the country, along with the Birmingham Hippodrome, to do a relaxed panto performance. And I went last year to the Wyvern in Swindon and saw the relaxed performance there, which was just incredible because they did two key things that really were emphasised today. One is preparing the audience so there were no unexpected shocks or surprises, and the space itself was flexible, including that chill out room, that room to sort of escape the auditorium. You've got to be proud of that, and although there's still work to be done, Imagine is doing some great work already.
Yeah, as I said, I'm heartened by what I've heard today because I know we are trying our best. We really do think about accessibility every step of the way. The difficulty we have being a big commercial producer with 19 different venues we're working with, there's going to be different constraints in each of those productions and venues. Sometimes it's going to be the logistics of the building itself. Not every building is large enough to have a chill out space. But we've kind of come away today and said what we can do as a producer is kind of come together and create a checklist and give every venue and every director that checklist and say, look, we're not going to be able to achieve 100% of this, but let's tick as many things off of this checklist that's within our capability, and that's all we can do. Just know that we're doing our best and trying in every area that we can do.
Yeah, so there's still work to be done.
It's all about education and sharing information, and you've seen what was discussed today. That's the key. Just share information, keep talking about it, educate people, make it just the normal thing that is done in every pantomime season. There are accessible performances. We've learned so many things today. Half of it we're doing, half of it we're not doing. But we've been so proud over the last few years to see those relaxed performances grow and see the attendance grow. And we've learned today maybe having every seat filled isn't the right thing to be doing a relaxed performance. You never know what you're doing right and wrong. So having the right people communicate what's right to do and keep having the conversation. That's how we learn as producers, and then we have to pass that information on and educate our venues and our front of house teams and our audiences.
I think it's important as well for any audience member who goes to multiple venues to see some sort of order across the board, and as you're part of the UK Panto Association as well, the talk today was about putting a resource file of information up on the website for all venues to access so we can actually get some sort of continuity.
Absolutely, and I think that's been one of the key things that's come out today is providing that resource, because it's not that easy. You know, when we first started introducing relaxed performances and we would be liaising with the marketing and senior management teams at the venue, like, we know that audience is out there. How do we reach out to them? And you don't know where to start, and it's not that you don't want to reach out to them, you just don't know. Whereas if we can, you know, as the UKPA can use that resource platform to share that information. We've come away today with some key websites of companies that you're not going to get it right every time, but at least it's a starting point and will hopefully point you in the direction of the next step you can take. And that's so important. You've got to start somewhere.
And I'd like to say a huge thank you to our panellists.
What a fabulous day. Sadly, that's it for now, though. I must say, first of all, congratulations to Sam Monday-Webb and the UK Pantomime Association team for what was a well-received, informative and encouraging day here in Oxford. One thing to come out of the discussion was the idea of creating a best practice information pack with notes from the event today to ensure there is some continuity in the approach to accessibility, relaxed performances and so on from producers and venues across the UK. So keep an eye on the website at pantomimeassociation.co.uk for that to be available. Meanwhile, in the next episode, we're going to discuss theatre ticket financing. Imagine Theatre's joint CEO, Sarah Bowden, joins me to answer the question, why do theatre tickets cost what they do? So please remember to subscribe through your favourite podcast app and join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 90.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.